all know that supply and demand make a market, and in Miami, there are 4 years of supply in the market above $1 million. Let that sink in for a minute. For sellers, that's less than an ideal situation, but for buyers, it's their time. Today, we're going to peel back the curtain to talk about what's making buyers move in the current market. Are prices still falling, or have they stabilized? With so much product to choose from, who are the active buyers, and what's pushing them off the sidelines? With us are panelists who hardly need an introduction. All the way on the far side is Phil Gutman, who is president of Brown Harris Stevens' Miami operation, which has been growing its presence and currently has around 200 agents. He was a VP of sales at Douglas Elliman Development Marketing as well, so he'll have some new development expertise. Next to him is Orrin Alexander of Douglas Elliman, who runs the Alexander team with his brother Tal, and together they've been responsible for several headline-making deals. Mike Pappas, right next to him, is president and CEO of the Kais Company, which he and his brother took over from his father. They've done a few acquisitions in the past few years and are number one in Palm Beach with $1.8 billion in sales last year. Finally, we have Ron Shuffield, president and CEO of Ron Shuffield with a huge fan base. And also president and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices, EWM Realty, one of the biggest residential firms in South Florida with 900 agents and 10 offices. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in and ask Orrin a question because a few weeks ago, you sold 3 Indian Creek Island Road for $50 million. Was that a one-off deal, or is the luxury market back?
I would say that depends how you define luxury market. So what I'm seeing personally is that I have listings all the way from Coral Gables to Aventura, from $1 million up, and there's certain listings that today we don't even have an opportunity to show it once every 2 weeks, and there's certain listings we're showing every day. So I think what we're seeing is it's a tale of two markets. So on the super prime, as I like to call the market of what we sold on 3 Indian Creek, it speaks to the quality of the product. It speaks to the caliber of the location. That market is as strong as I've ever seen it. It's not a coincidence that sale happened a couple months ago, and we've also had a couple other sales that were almost as significant done as well this past year. So that market, I think what we're seeing is the whole world, the upper high net worth individuals are all focusing on Miami. And those are some of the smartest people in the world. And they understand what quality is. They understand what good design is. And they're focused on 3 neighborhoods, 4 or 5 different buildings. And those are the buildings that today are still seeing activity.
At the same time, we know that a lot of foreign capital is tied up and the foreign buyers have retreated. Ron, can you talk a little bit about how the buyer pool, the active buyers, how the demographics of that group have changed over the past year?
Sure.
Or so?
When you look back, this market began to change in the fall of 2015. So here we are in the fall of 2019. So we've been experiencing a different type of market for these last 4 years. And it takes these markets a couple of years at least to settle. And as we look at the inventory supply that's growing, and you mentioned that earlier, condos over $1 million in Dade County now have a 45-month supply of inventory. And we know from watching this a long time, I'm talking about over $1 million in the luxury market. So we've looked at this for many, many years. I mean, the whole industry has. And we know that when in the $1 million plus market, we can handle about 12 to 18 months of supply. That's a proper balance. If we have 12 to 18 months of supply in the over $1 million market, we have enough buyers, enough sellers to generate a solid market. The sellers feel like that they're getting some return on their investment. The buyers feel like that they're getting a good value. But once you get to 45 months, I mean, almost 4 years of supply, then you just have way too much inventory. We try to make this business more complicated than it is, but it's a supply and demand business. And as the supply grows to that level, then prices are going to soften. They just have to. And yes, as Orrin was saying, there are going to be special properties, that one penthouse unit or that one, oceanfront property that people have been waiting 30 years in some cases for it to come on the market. But when you look at the people that were buying before 4 years ago, most of that was international. 42%, according to our MLS stats, 4 years ago, 42% of every buyer we were selling as an industry, and that's the people in this room, 42% of the $1 million plus sales that we were making were being sold to someone from outside the country. And today that number is about 25 to 30%. So it's still a huge percentage of international buyers for our market compared to other cities. But other major cities that are dealing with international buyers are experiencing the same thing. I mean, New York City certainly has, and we have. But the good news is, and you said it earlier, a lot of people are coming here. The U.S. Census report tells us that over 950 people a day are setting up permanent residency in Florida. So that means by the time the sun sets tonight, we'll have 950 more permanent residents in Florida. And the pool of those people is getting much more affluent. I mean, people with a lot of money are coming down here to avoid high taxes somewhere else.
So quick question, if 25% of the buyers are still foreign, where are they coming from? So assuming, there's not an influx of buyers from China, for example. Mike, do you want to take a stab at what you're saying?
It's the same suspect. We're still getting the Colombians. We're still getting some. The Venezuelans have definitely gone away. So Brazil, because of the strong dollar, you've seen a little bit of the weaker position in the marketplace, but you're still seeing the same individuals coming. Europe is very strong, coming over from England. So we're seeing the same individuals, just not as intense as it once was.
I think you really have to speak about that specific product that the international is looking at and where they're exactly coming from. So for instance, Colombia. For them, are they going to buy something that's $1,500, $2,000 a foot? No, because they've never seen prices like that where they're from. When you look at the British buyer, sure, for them, it's more acceptable to pay $2,000 a foot for product, but with their currency fluctuation and their current situation, they're kind of out of the game at the moment. So you really have to think about what that international buying power and what they're used to seeing in terms of pricing. Now, the New Yorker, obviously, they're used to seeing that $2,000, $3,000 plus per foot product. And when they come down to Miami, quite frankly, they think it's quite cheap in a sense. So for them, we're seeing a lot, specifically as of lately, due to obviously a lot of people coming down because of our favorable tax terms here. So those buyers they start by coming to the Miami a little more often, 2, 3, 4 weekends a season. Then they figure, okay, I want to rent the following season. So this year alone, I mean, it's crazy. We're getting 2, 3 calls a day as of the last 2 weeks of New Yorkers looking for a place for the season. And that market dried up. There's no more good high-end rentals in this city. So that forces them to start focusing on purchasing. So I think we're all, if you look at when the tax reform took place, there's definitely been an upwards trend of New Yorkers. It doesn't happen overnight, right? You don't just get the news that you could save, 10 to 15% and jump ship and move to Miami. It takes time. You start to look at schools for your kids. You start to explore the different options. You speak to your accountant. You start setting up the systems to make sure that you're doing it the legitimate way. So we're going through that process. Now, a lot of those New Yorkers are looking, my experience at least is seeing a lot of the homes on the waterfront we've seen a lot of velocity in that market over the last year. It's, most of the spec homes have got swallowed up, and due to the fact that the market was soft over the last 2-3 years, not a lot of spec home builders were building. So now we'll start to see a little more focus on land, and we'll start to see that trophy properties on the waterfront start to appreciate as well.
Before I ask another question, just if the panelists can speak into the mic. Luckily, we have great AC, but I want to make sure everyone can hear you.
Okay, I agree with Warren on that front. We've had an enormous spike from the Northeast. I mean, they did a really good job of sending everybody our way, to be quite honest with you. Thank you, New York.
Billy Joel sang about that a few years back.
But, as Warren was saying, look, at first when that whole tax reform took place, a lot of people didn't really know what it was going to mean to them. Sorry. So the first year came and went, and then the second year just came and went, and now they're saying, oh my God. And that's why, like he was saying, it's not that easy to just pick up a company overnight and tell everybody you're fired or get on a plane. There's a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, and you're starting to see that. Look, Carl Icahn has been here for a long time, but just now is he moving his business over here. Same thing with Barry.
So are those one-off moves, or is there sort of a number that everyone kind of has? Like, is there a way to quantify that move from the Northeast or where?
I heard Bruce Berkowitz, Eddie Lambert, and speak 3 years ago, and they said that they were predicting, and you guys have all heard this, that Miami, Singapore, and Dubai will be the new future for financial and fun, where Hong Kong, New York, and London were yesterday. So I think there is this momentum because of technology, because of the warrant, because of the sizzle, because of the sex appeal of all our marketplaces. There's no question that we are the future and we are what we thought. You talk about $2,000 a foot. It was unheard of in Miami 5-10 years ago, and now it's becoming a norm, but that's still entry level, $1,600, $1,700 at New York. So. And
then one other question on this, the buyers coming from the higher tax states is, when you hear about a Carl Icahn, finally moving fully, those are like obviously, the highest net worth individuals who are coming. How does that impact the rest of the market? I guess for like, the mere multimillionaire, and then the rest of us.
Well, I think when it comes to targeting in my business, obviously, I'm looking for buyers today. There's plenty of sellers there, but my focus is primarily on buyers. And when we look at Carl Icahn, I could tell you he already owns a house on Indian Creek for over a decade. But we focus on his other top tier guys, because those guys are going to be moving down here and going to be focusing on finding them houses and such. But my experience in Miami in general is that it's kind of like above $5 million, we have a sense of demand. Under $5 million, I find it that we just don't have those jobs to support those people. And I think that's probably the biggest issue in Miami right now is we need to really focus on developing certain industries to drive, I hate to call it middle of the road, but more that working class buyer to Miami.
Well, we have that going on now. There's a group here that works with our Beacon Council and our Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, and the name of the movement is called One Community, One Goal. We've been working on this for 2 decades. And we have identified, as you said, 7 different industries. And many of those industries, our fashion industry is something that wasn't existent at all here too much just a few years ago. And now that's growing. And of course, technology, we know what's happening in this neighborhood where we are. The healthcare, we probably have some of the finest healthcare in the world now. Baptist Health 2 years ago opened a $500 million cancer institute. Now seeing 1,100 patients a day with cancer. Those patients before now had to go to New York or had to go to MD Anderson in Houston, and now they're staying here. And of course, that's provided a lot of jobs. Baptist has partnered with Sloan Kettering out of New York. And Sloan Kettering has sent about 50 doctors down here that live here now. So yes, we hear of a lot of great high-paying jobs, but those people need the other services, restaurants, grocery stores, buying cars, all the different things that come with that. So I think the fact that we don't have taxes is a huge, no income tax in Florida is a huge draw for these people. And not just these people. I mean, we sold a property to someone in Coconut Grove last month for $2.8 million coming from Ohio, where they have an 8% income tax. So for a wealthy person, that's savings enough to justify moving to a place where the weather's warm and it's easy to get to.
So obviously for someone who specifically wants to buy here because of the favorable taxes, they have urgency. But how do the rest of you help create urgency among buyers when there is, a lot of inventory, as Ron was saying, like, or for example, how do you create urgency if there's a listing that's been on and off the market for a while or for whatever reason hasn't sold? You can both do it.
Tell us all your secrets.
Yeah, well, if you look at the market today, unfortunately, while we've seen, I think Element just produced their third quarter reports, and what we've seen is even though there's been an increase in median price, there's also been an increase in days on the market. So unfortunately, we're still, I think, on the luxury. If you look at the luxury Miami Beach market, it's still an average of like 294 days on the market, and that just has a lot to do with just bad pricing. So because of that, unfortunately, the buyers are really looking at everything and saying, hey, we need to come in, 20%, even up to 30% off of, asking price. A good example of that is there was just a house on Sunset Island 1, which was originally priced, I believe, around $25 million. And it just sold for $13 million 2-3 years later. So it's unfortunate that those inefficiencies happen in our market. And that's why it's really important for the brokers to really, put their foot down when negotiating with their sellers and really make sure they understand where the market is and price things right so we could avoid that.
Yeah, it's a constant news story that somebody has an overpriced listing and then it sells for what it probably really should go for. And then all of a sudden it's media headlines that so-and-so sold their house for a 30% discount. Like, it shouldn't have been there in the first place.
We've sold a $16 million property in Fort Lauderdale, Huizinga Senior's house, through auction. And we sold a $20 million property on Key Biscayne, one of the highest prices ever sold, through concierge. And I think what we found, it gives clarity, gives consistency for those people that want to sell. It's risky, and there is some, caveats that I think, but managed properly, you do get the focus, you get the attention, and probably what Phil says, you get it sold at the right price that would have sold for that if you had reduced it accordingly. But the seller sometimes wants to test the market to find out.
Kind of put it in perspective where we are today. Condominiums over $1 million in Dade County for the last quarter have sold at 81% of their original asking price, and is
20% discount.
a 20% discount. And as we've been hearing here, that the prices are still generally too high. When you have 45 months of supply, price has to be adjusted. We refer to it as right pricing, and the buyers are out there. We have more pent up demand for luxury housing in Miami than we have ever had in history. I've been here doing this for a long time, and this is the greatest number of buyers that we have. I mean, I have a buyer in New York right now, $3 to $5 million. He wants to buy a condominium here out of New York. Same things, interested in saving taxes, but he's not willing to pay yesterday's price. So today, 81% of all condos in Dade County over $1 million, of all condos in Dade County priced over $1 million, they're selling at 81% of their original asking price. A year ago, that was 87% of their original asking price. When our sellers get their prices in line, then things move fine. Single family is doing a much better job of this. Of course, we didn't overbuild in single family because we don't have any more land left to build single family generally. But in single family, we're selling for 84% of the original asking price. But a year ago, that was 88% of the original asking price. So when our sellers get their prices priced appropriately, then they sell.
Well, I think one thing I want to bring up is that the buyer changed. So what happened was 5 to 10 years ago, the buyer profile was foreigners. They were coming from, quite frankly, from countries that just didn't know what good design is, what high quality condominiums look like. So you're able to get away with more. They were creating condos with brands that didn't make sense to be slapped on a condo because, you would get that Brazilian, Russian who didn't know any better and got impressed and bought into that brand. Today, the buyers are coming from New York and from other parts of the country where they're much more sophisticated. They are some of the biggest collectors in the world and own many homes around the world and worked with, great architects and designers. And I think you can understand what that picture looks like. A great example is a project that I worked on was 87 Park with Renzo Piano, which, arguably got launched in the worst time in the market, but managed to pull through. The product today, I think, is almost 100% sold out with delivery in the next couple months. And that just speaks about the actual product. There is still plenty of buyers out there. There's just not a lot of product that speaks to them.
Phil, this is a good time to talk a little bit about new development. There have been, over the past few years, there have been some big developers who've shelved plans, just to put it off. What do you think it'll take to resurrect some of those projects or to drop new ones?
So, this is a loaded question, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Some of the developers that have shelved the projects, they've shelved them because they were enormous projects and you need to build up a certain velocity. And the velocity just would not have been there. I do feel that there was, me personally, I feel that there was just too much inventory delivered the last cycle. I'd like to see the developers just take a little bit more of a pause, let the existing inventory that's out there get gobbled up a little bit before we dump another few thousand units into the market. It's healthy to take a pause. You don't.
Well, I want to just stop you for a second because, again, with every market, there's winners and losers. And I think Michael was up here in the 2 panels ago and speaking about the psychographic of the actual buyer. And I can tell you that, if you are creative and you're innovative in today's market, you could create a product that will sell. But you really have to do, or think outside the box and really understand your buyer and their profile. Because I can tell you this, I have plenty of buyers that are coming to town every weekend and there's no product that speaks to them. So I think there's a real opportunity in today's market for developers that do understand, what that profile looks like.
There is room for nice product, but I can assure you no developer is happy with the actual velocity that they're getting these days.
It's supply and demand.
Yeah, it's...
So is there a certain location, price point, size?
Look,
What is
any-
kind of the sweet spot that the
seeing
market
Palm
demands
Beach.
right now?
You're seeing them move to Palm Beach. There is a lot of activity in Palm Beach, Singer Island, at a price point that is a lot more, because of there's a slant down, $2,000, $3,000 a foot here, $1,000 a foot in Fort Lauderdale, and $600, $700 a foot in Palm Beach for a similar product. And so because land cost is so different. So as you push north, you're seeing some more developments.
When you're scratching at the 2,000 a foot number, you really got to dig. You got to be creative. They're not just lining up anymore in the street with it, pitching a tent, waiting overnight to line up and write contracts.
It's not a coincidence that this summer there were 2 sales in Palm Beach north of $100 million. And that we, here in Miami, I broke the record and sold the most expensive house in Miami history. That's not a coincidence. The super prime market is very strong. There's just, quite frankly, not that much product that speaks to those buyers. So again, it's a tale of 2 markets in this city.
One thing is the style. The buyers at the high end today are really contemporary buyers. And we have, if you look at the number of single-family homes that have sold in Miami-Dade County in the last 12 months, it's only 13 homes. So 13 homes, and out of those 13 homes, 11 of them were high contemporary, built in the last 2 or 3 years, and 2 of them were older homes that sold mostly for land value, all for land value. So pretty much essentially 100% of what we're selling at the high end is a high contemporary home. And of course, we have a lot more Mediterranean and other styles at that level. So once you get into that stratosphere, still not a lot of sales when you think about less than 20 sales.
Yeah, I'll just say regarding the aesthetic of single-family homes, yes, I agree with you. Most of the product has been contemporary, but I think it just has to do with the age of the product. So quite frankly, we just didn't have that sophisticated buyer coming to Miami 10 years ago when we built these Mediterranean McMansions. So those buyers, by the way, now are telling me they actually want a design that's a little more, kind of traditional, a little more Spanish, but they want it to be sophisticated.
Or transitional.
Transitional, as a lot of them are calling it. So I think if you look at the sales, I did an interesting study once for a client, but if you look at the houses, north of $20 million that's sold in this market in the last couple of years, and the homes that were 10 years or older, pretty much all sold for land value. And I think that's going to be consistent, but we're going to start to see the demand change from the buyers. They're tired of a lot of these moderns, quite frankly, just aren't good. And modern is a type of architecture, a design that you need to spend the money if you want to do modern right. So we're seeing a lot of value engineering on the modern houses, and it's a little sad because I think we're going to look back in the next couple years and say, what happened to the Venetian Islands? Like, what did we let them, all these developers, do to what used to be some beautiful Miami architecture?
I want to talk a little bit about pricing. There's a lot of professional brokers here, obviously. How do each of you get your buyers and sellers, whether it's an individual or a developer, to the same page? Do you think at this point sellers realize they need to go lower in some cases? How do you?
I think everybody knows you've got the statistics, you do the homework, you've got the facts, and selling through facts and information helps, but it's still an emotional game. So facts won't sell. You have to personally get them emotionally engaged, and then they will buy. But by giving them reality, showing them the information, that's the only technique.
Look, I know it's tempting, but don't take overpriced listings. You're just going to wind up sitting on them, spending a lot of marketing dollars. They're going to expire eventually.
It should start with the managers. You know, you're in that position of running a brokerage where you shouldn't let your agents take overpriced listings.
I know, and sometimes they walk in with the contract already done, or there's nothing. Trust me, there's been plenty of visits to my office, and you kind of wonder what they were thinking and what they were smoking when they brought in that contract. Yeah.
So, Oren, you would turn down the listing if it was way overpriced.
I've turned down a ton of business, and quite frankly, it's just about being strong with your seller and making him understand that you're the expert. You understand this market better than anyone, and if he wants to work with you, he's got to go with your advice. And I understand, because the fact is, the way the brokerage business works, a lot of people, especially earlier in their careers, they want to get that big listing. They want to, get as much listings, so hopefully it gets their name out there and so forth. I mean, most of my career early on was positioned with these, trophy properties that no one thought I could sell. And a lot of them I got very lucky, because you need to at that price point. But in general, it's very important for the efficiency of our market to not overprice listings.
There's so much data available to people today. I mean, our buyers know as much about values today as many realtors in the marketplace, because the data is there. But, I just encourage our associates to talk to each other as well. I mean, you can't shoot from the hip and set a price on a house. I mean, so I've been doing this a long time, but I still go to a lot of people and say, well, what do you think? You just sold a home down here similar to this house. What did you hear from buyers that were coming through to look at that house? And, you put a lot of data together, and that's the value of the people in this room, that we carry more knowledge in our heads than we have in the computer. But, we still need the computer data as well, but then we need somebody to help our sellers and buyers interpret the data. And that's the value that everybody in this room brings to the business.
Interestingly, though, the four of you operate under the assumption that brokers are bringing buyers and sellers together, but there are some iBuying companies that have come into Miami lately. And I'm curious, Mike, I think we were talking about this earlier. You've seen...
it's not the price ring that we're talking about.
No.
So they're coming in at the two Zillows here, our friend, and they basically are a competitor now, and they're coming in to buy properties direct to the consumer. There's a lot of them, Open Door, Knock. I mean, so there's other programs out there. So there's no question that across the country, in that $200,000 to $400,000 to $500,000 market, they're aggressively going after the consumer and trying to go direct and basically knock the broker out.
When it comes to the price points that we are discussing, I don't think that the broker will ever be cut out. I think that they need to be there to be that buffer zone to help, calm the negotiations, talk sense into both sides. They need the expertise of guys like this. And
the real math is it's a 10 to 15% drop. We did a study in the 4 markets that they've done it in Austin and Phoenix and Charlotte and Atlanta, and it really shows. So a $400,000 seller is losing $40,000 to $60,000 in the buy and the sell. They're just looking. There's a fee about 9% that they're just looking at the difference between our fee and that fee and thinking it's a 3 or 4% savings, but it's under the market. And then when they go back to put it back on the market, it's above the market. So I think our job as realtors is to educate the consumer and be able to come up. We've got a program coming out where we're going to be measuring and monitoring all of those bids. So when we go into the home seller, we can say, you can get this, but we think we can maximize the price. We're starting to do renovations. We've partnered with Curbio. So we're going in and doing home renovations for the consumer that doesn't want to put the dollars up front, so that if they put the dollars and they do the work, it'll enhance the sales. So we think we're the white hat guys, maximizing the price for the sellers, whereas the other people are really not aligned with our thinking.
Ron, are there other ways that that your company is adapting, just as the whole landscape of brokerage changes?
Well, is that to me or Mike?
Ron, Mike,
Well,
any of you?
I think that the information today is really key to so much of what we were talking about here this morning, or this afternoon. The fact that that people can go the iBuyer route. They can go online, they get somebody to make them a bid, but that bid, as Mike has pointed out, is going to be considerably less than they could sell it for just going through a traditional manner if they'll price it right. One of the things that the iBuying market is attractive. One of the things that's attractive to people is that it happens fast. Like, I need to sell my house in 30 days. Well, but do you really need to take a 20% drop in the value of it? I mean, if you just price it right, we'll sell it in 30 days anyway. And so I think that that's the message that we need to do a better job as an industry to tell people. When you see that properties are selling for 81% of their original asking price, then it was priced too high to start with. And so that's the basic, basic story. But I think that the iBuying is here to stay because more and more people are renting. And so that gives these iBuyers an opportunity to buy and either keep them for rent. If you look in our MLS today, this room is renting more homes than we're selling. That was not the case before the recession. In 2003, 4, 5, we sold more homes than we rented. In fact, if you put all the buyers and the tenants in a bowl and you pull them out, and before the recession, we were selling about 75% of those transactions, total transactions, and we were renting about 25%. Now today, we're selling only 45% and we're renting 55%.
Wow.
So that is kind of just a picture of where some of the younger buyers are today, people that got that had to move out of the market during the recession because they lost everything. Many of those people are still renting, but we're seeing that many people do just like renting.
I think there's more money, billions of dollars coming into our business. I'm a SOB, many of you know, son of the broker. And so I've been in the business for 40 years. And I think at the reality is there's money chasing the real estate industry technologically, brokerage-wise and program-wise that we've never seen before. So there's an onslaught. But I think a lot of stories haven't been written and won't be told. We've seen in the past, Prudential coming to the marketplace, Sears, all big firms, GMAC, that said they were going to disrupt our market. But at the end of the day, it gets down to that emotional sale with the buyer or seller. And I think it needs that person. And as good as we are, it's still an art against the science. And I think it's an emotional decision that's made 6, 7 times in their lifetime, if that doesn't happen frequently. So we don't see it being disintermediate. We actually are looking at the challenge, and it's going to be interesting to see when that money dries up, what's left standing.
Well, let's make it interesting. I think the real elephant in the room is now what happens to Compass with what happened with WeWork. So we'll start to see if these companies that can't generate positive cash flow, what eventually, if the money keeps coming in, and what that will look like in the next 6 months.
I'm glad someone mentioned the elephant. We have a few minutes left, so I just want to ask if we can take a few questions from the audience. Actually, we have one question. We'll take it.
Mr. Shuffield, it's great to see you again.
Yes.
So the question is, everybody's talking about $20 million homes. What about the average below $1 million in Coral Gables, Pinecrest, etc.? What do you think is going on with that?
Yeah, great question. When you look at the neighborhoods that were good for the last, in Coral Gables' case, for almost 100 years now. Coral Gables was founded in 1926, so it's getting pretty close to its 100th anniversary. But you have many houses there that were built in the 50s and 60s that, were selling at those times for $50,000, and now we're selling those same homes for $700,000. And people want to get back to be closer to where they need to be. They want to get closer to where they need to be. They don't want to drive anymore. Traffic is not only a problem here, it's a problem in every major city in the world. As Bill Talbert, the head of our Convention and Visitors Bureau, says, give me one city that doesn't have a traffic problem, and I'll tell you a city that's not growing. And I think that that's the case with Miami. We're going to continue to have traffic, and that's a reality. But people, whether you live in Brickell and you want to walk out of your building into the beautiful new Brickell City Center, or restaurants, grocery stores, all those facilities are now within walking distance of our downtown areas. But in answer to your specific question, in Coral Gables, there are a lot of homes that are 1,500 square feet, 1,700 square feet. Some of those homes are still occupied by the original families that built them back in the 60s and 70s. And now those are turning over. And developers, investors are coming in, totally rebuilding these houses to today's style, opening up the kitchens, all the things that people use to live with today, but still maintain that same mid-century look. And then, the furnishings are now the mid-century. So everybody's kind of going back to that. And the values are the consumer is giving that great additional value. So consequently, you're seeing homes in Coral Gables now selling for $500 a square foot, 1,500 square feet on streets that we never saw that before. And you will continue to see more and more of that. And the demand for the under $1 million market is strong. I mean, we only have about 4.5 months of supply for single family homes in Dade County under $1 million. Now, it's always fun to talk about the $1 million product, but we sell a whole lot more of the under $1 million. And even when you get below $360,000, people don't realize that's 45% of the market is under $360,000 in single family homes.
And interest rates are driving it. I mean, it's hot. Under $400,000, you got 3 months supply. You don't have the inventory. If you get a listing in that, it's sold in a day. So it's the hottest market we've ever seen, and I think it's a very tight market.
I tell our people, if they get a call on a listing today that's under $500,000, just take the listing over the phone because we're going to sell it. I don't care where it is.
Looks like you better change your strategy, man.
Yeah.
All right, we can do one more question right here.
We've never seen this low of interest rates. I was talking to Citibank. They said they just did a 10-year fixed 2.75% mortgage.
Home starts across the country are down too. And so that's putting a lot of pressure back on existing housing. And people love the existing housing once it's been restored because it's already close to where everybody wants to be already.
So, afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Lennis, and I'm taking my broker's license next week, actually. And I specialize in $1 million and below. And my biggest problem is all these Airbnbs that are gobbling up all my market share because I have 5 buyers and I can't find a home for them. What do you guys feel about that? Do we need to do something with that, or just keep it letting everybody free for all, get Airbnbs and bring all the people down?
It's a city problem.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, obviously the courts had a ruling last week, I think, on that. And of course, Miami Beach has been the most aggressive about that. And yes, I mean, it does concern us all. I'm not sure at a free enterprise system that we just have to work within what the laws are telling us that we can do. I mean, many of these cases are going to court across the country now, but obviously that's a product that people like, and the investor feels like that they're being prevented from earning a return on their money, and I understand that, but at the same time, we don't want to destroy our neighborhoods either.
Yeah, I think it's a zoning issue. I think as it gets out of hand, I think you're going to start seeing some more restrictions, and I think it should curb itself, but we'll find out. But I think it's the community that's got to manage ourselves.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.